Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now, a Pre-Ryzen AMD based gaming PC won't cost much to buy or build these days. This old rig features an 8-core FX 8350, GTX 970 and 16GB of DDR3 RAM. Before Ryzen, the 8-core FX series were the best AMD had to offer, though you've only got to revisit a few reviews from late 2012 to see that these processors were often bested by Intel quad-core i5s in games. Inside this rig I've got the 8350 paired with a GTX 970 graphics card. This 4GB GPU was one of the best price to performance propositions in 2014, and while game ready driver support ended a while ago, I want to see how this time capsule PC handles itself. I've also got 16GB of 1600MHz DDR3 in here. It took me a couple of seconds to realise why it looks so wrong, but it's half height RAM designed for smaller form factor machines. My money is on the FX 8350 causing the most problems here today, but let's see. I bought this in pre-built form from CEX, so I had no idea what the exact specs would be, more specifically the PSU and motherboard. Now the PSU is fine, but unfortunately we have an ASUS M5A78LM USB 3 board in here, which has a pretty weak VRM design and no heat sinks. It gets hot. It's literally the hottest day of the year too, so that is not good for our board. As soon as I started basically any game, it would run fine for like 10 seconds, and then the frame rate would be cut in half. The processor was intermittently throttling in this board as it tried to manage the heat. This was easily fixed by ripping the parts out the case, putting them on the table, and pointing a case fan down at the motherboard. Any overclocking is probably off the table, though from past experiences with FX chips, certainly within the last couple of years, it will make minimal difference. But let's see what this aging FX build can manage. First things first, Crimson Desert is out. I believe the CPU lacks a certain instruction set because it told me that this wasn't supported here. Battlefield 6 is also out as we can't enable secure boot, so let's focus instead on the positives. While it may seem like the following results could benefit from a faster graphics card, I'd like to state that the majority of the time this is not the case because of the CPU bottleneck. If anything, it's the GTX 970 that would benefit from a faster CPU. But it's not all doom and gloom performance-wise. I want to start off with Cyberpunk 2077 at 1080p with the lowest settings. Now I had to use FSR 2.1 balanced here, and this game did not enjoy running on the FX 8350. I believe I've tested this on the 970, let's say a couple of years ago, and it did run okay. Of course we had to make some pretty heavy visual sacrifices, but here with the FX 8350 chip there were all sorts of pop-ins, textures not loading, this guy is walking about the streets with his cheeks hanging out because his clothes haven't loaded in. Oh, he's literally just walking around in his underwear. Okay, fair enough mate, it is a hot day after all, I'll let you off. We're getting at least 30 FPS. 43 was the average, but the percentile lows were pretty horrific, 19 and 8. I will be testing the 970 on its own in another video with a CPU that's more powerful so that we can actually see the GPU in action in 2026. 007 First Light next, 1080p with the lowest settings, of course, FSR performance here for 35 frames per second. Now I will admit this did a lot better than I was anticipating, but again it is the CPU that is the primary limitation. That said, this rig is fairly evenly matched overall and the 970 is going to struggle regardless, but interestingly, and I'll reiterate what I said earlier, a more powerful graphics card is not going to really help us out here. All that happened when I added a more powerful graphics card was that our average increased ever so slightly, but the stutters and dips remain. So we were getting perhaps a few more FPS overall, but the performance dips and drops were not alleviated thanks to the limitations of the FX CPU. I want to talk about a more positive experience now, and that is the one I had with Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, because this ran really well. At 1080p with, albeit the lowest settings, an SMAA 2TX, we were getting over 50 frames per second, and it's clear that the GPU is the limitation here, but honestly this performance was surprisingly good. The FX 8350 really did a solid job here. Now this won't be playable for a lot of people. Enabling FSR doesn't really help that much because it seems to put more stress on the CPU, but I think this performance was certainly respectable, and I'd even call it playable. There are some instances where we will get at least 60 frames per second. Those are few and far between, of course, but it felt pretty smooth and consistent overall. And hopefully the frame time graph you're seeing on screen helps to represent that. Counter-Strike 2 also ran pretty well. Again, we're using the lowest settings at 1080p resolution, but we had no trouble in hitting at least 60 frames per second. In fact, most of the frame drops occurred when I got wiped out like that by other players, but apart from this, it was really smooth. I don't have many complaints with this one. We're not going to see super high frame rates like 144 FPS, so if you're playing this competitively, you're probably going to want a faster CPU. But if you've got an old FX rig like this one and you fancy playing a couple of games, then yeah, you're probably going to be fine if you've got a 60 FPS target in mind. Arc Raiders also surprised me with the lowest settings and FSR balanced here, which didn't really impact performance. Before in Kingdom Come, turning on FSR impacted the amount of stutters, made it a lot worse, but here it didn't really do that. We actually saw 58 FPS overall. The CPU is of course still the primary limitation, but the performance was a lot smoother than I thought it would be going into it. I thought we'd get a lot more stutters here. I chose to play GTA 5 Enhanced instead of the original version here because, as you can see, it is actually playable on the FX chip, which is struggling quite a bit. We're looking at least 95% usage here. Although, having said that, our GPU is also clocking at over 80-90% on occasion. So as I said at the start, this isn't a totally unmatched or unevenly matched pairing. In fact, these two go quite well together, but I think the GPU has certainly aged a little better. And GTA 5 Enhanced with high, so not even the lowest settings here, we're looking at 71 FPS overall, and the percentile lows, 43 and 34, weren't too bad. It was quite smooth a lot of the time. Resident Evil Requiem, I think this is beyond help really. Nothing we could do would allow us to play with a smooth plus 30 FPS average. We were getting 32 overall. This is with the lowest preset and FSR 3.1.5 set to balanced. FSR performance mode gave us the same result as did FSR 1. So yeah, we're struggling quite a bit here with our old FX 8350 system. I mean, at least the game started. That's one positive, but it's not going to run smooth no matter what you do to the settings. I've only got positive things to say about Helldivers 2 as well. Now, I know a lot of you are going to be looking at these results and thinking, that's not really playable. I mean, it's not 60 FPS, and in cases where we do get 60 FPS, we're still getting the occasional frame drop. But I think considering the hardware and the age of it, it is a respectable result for this CPU and GPU combo, considering both of them are pretty ancient, over 10 years old now, coming up to 15 years old in fact for the CPU. So I don't think it's a bad effort at all. Helldivers 2 certainly more GPU intensive, as we can see by the on-screen stats, and it's running with fairly close to 60 FPS, 56 overall, with fairly consistent percentile lows of 48 and 38. Let's finalise with the newest game tested today, Forza Horizon 6. This looks a lot choppier in the gameplay than it actually was. I had to record with the built-in Windows capture here, so it looks like it's stuttering all over the place, when in reality it was stuttering. No, it wasn't actually stuttering all over the place. It was actually okay, 44 FPS with a 1% low of 27 and a 0.1% low of 23, so it wasn't the smoothest experience in the world, but I think the footage is making it look a lot worse than it actually was, and it's clear that our CPU is struggling, especially in downtown Tokyo here. We'll end with a few gameplay scenes from titles running with a 4060 Ti instead. I swapped that 970 out for a faster GPU, but as I was saying before, the CPU is the limitation. I just wanted to see if we could push the settings slightly higher, and we can. Now, the reason I chose these games is because they were the more GPU intensive ones. So in these select few examples, replacing the card with something more powerful, in this case a 4060 Ti, which I wouldn't recommend, will actually give you better performance. Not going to alleviate any stutter that occurs, of course, because of the CPU, but if you have an FX chip, you pair it with a more powerful card than an old 970, in those GPU intensive cases, then you are going to see better performance. I don't think I can say the same for Resident Evil Requiem though. This looked a little GPU intensive when I was playing it. Like, the GPU was sort of getting up towards 90-95% utilization. and I've had experiences with older cards before where it's struggled quite a bit, so I thought I'd swap it out, but it didn't really make a difference. But we'll do what we can with this FX rig. I think I'll swap the motherboard out perhaps, and then keep it just to see how it performs in future with newly released games. But as for this one, I'm going to end it there. So thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.